Hello everyone, my name is Marina Moon, and in this video I'm going to share with you a very simple technique on how to create change in your life. And part of the reason why I wanted to create this video is because, like you, I have explored and experimented with different ways of making changes in different areas of my life, and I have come to understand over time what works for me and what doesn't work for me. So I will share with you what works for me, and I hope that some of the ideas that I talk about will resonate with you. So as you likely know, I have a tarot channel, and I was originally going to make this video without including tarot in it. But as I was thinking about the techniques that I'm going to talk about today, what to do and what not to do, two tarot cards came into my awareness. Basically, these tarot cards sum up what I'm going to talk about here. So I'm going to introduce them. And if you are not into tarot and you that's not your thing, that's okay. Just listen to the energies of these cards, because that's what I'm going to talk about. All right, so the first card is Temperance. And the Temperance card is about moderation, not doing things to excess. And it's also blending two things. So do you see how this angel is blending liquid in the two cups? And the idea is that if you blend two things together, so in this case it's higher and lower energies, you will create something completely new. Kind of like in chemistry class when you would blend one chemical with another, and the whole thing would be completely changed. That's the idea here, is that you're blending to bring something new, to create something new. But it's done in a very moderate, balanced way. Now the card of the Tower is very different. This is very sudden change. This is the card of getting a divorce or ending a relationship or changing jobs or moving from one place to another. In the tarot deck, it's usually unwanted change, but it doesn't necessarily have to be. Tower events can be very much self-created. And the idea is that the foundations, something basic and foundational in your life gets torn down, gets changed. So this is the energy that I'm going to talk about that has been problematic for me in creating change. And I'm going to talk about the technique in the context of the Temperance card. But first, let me talk about what I found out that I shouldn't do when I'm trying to do something different in my life. And I'm going to share with you an experience I had around exercising more, because it's a very clear example of how this kind of approach was problematic for me and can be problematic for a lot of people. So in my 20s, I did a lot of experimenting with gym memberships, exercising the right way, the recommended way, and I failed at it a lot. And part of the reason was that I actually don't really like vigorous exercise, the kind of exercise where you're running for a long time or really sweating it out at the gym. But I thought that there was a right way to do it, or you had to do it a certain way. And so what I would end up doing is creating these very, you could say, reasonable but large goals for myself, and I would completely try to change my exercise habits. I would go from not doing very much to having these lofty goals, right? And it's almost, this energy is very similar to the energy that we hear about or might try to participate around the first of the year, where we're setting all these intentions. We're going to change this, we're going to change that. It's a lot of change very fast to create a whole different way of being. Now, some people can do this. Some people can get away with it, but what tends to happen for most of us is that it's just too much. It's just too much too soon, and we end up reverting back to our old habits. So in comes the Temperance card. Okay? In comes this energy, and this is the technique that I'm going to talk about. So it has to do with moderation of doing things, of making small, reasonable changes, but there's more. So keep listening. And I'm going to share an example of how this has worked in my life. The idea, before I talk about the example, is that you create one change, one intention, a very reasonable and doable intention for you, a goal of change. And you consistently stick with that thing that you're trying to do. And that change will have a domino-like effect in your life. So how it worked for me was that when I was in my 30s, I had my children. And after the birth of my son, who's now almost 13, I did very little exercise. And as I mentioned before, I had a history of doing kind of exercising, the right way, 4 to 5 times a week, 45 to 50 minutes at the gym, whatever the recommendations were at the time. But I couldn't keep doing that. It was just too different from my starting point. It was just too different. And even though I stuck with it for weeks at a time, it just wasn't something that I would continue to integrate. So I would keep at it for, the magic 21 days, 30 days, and it still wouldn't stick. So after my son was born, I did very little because I had less time than I had before, and a much less desire to exercise. When my daughter was born, who's now 9 years old, I really realized that I needed to do something. I couldn't just continue to ignore the needs of my body to move. Now remember, I don't like vigorous exercise, but I knew the benefits of doing something healthful and good, like moving your body. I knew that was something that I needed to do in some way. So what I did is I set a very small goal, and you're going to laugh when you hear this because it's actually kind of funny. The goal that I set was very small. So imagine that you're mixing something new, this tiny little goal, into, let's say this cup represents being sedentary in my life, for that particular example. I made a goal of doing abs for 5 minutes. 5 minutes, the 5-minute abs, not the old 80s tape, just 5 minutes of basic ab work. And I did that for a few weeks, about 3 times a week. And that's what I did. Now you might think, what? How is that leading you anywhere? But a surprising thing happened is that I felt really good. And I don't know if there was any real change going on in my body, but it started to build this positive momentum. And then after a few weeks, I included about 10 to 15 minutes of slow walking on a treadmill in my house 3 to 4 times a week. That was my goal. And again, you might be thinking, what? That's nothing. But I'm adding, right? I'm adding a little bit. And by the way, as an aside, your progress does not have to be as gradual as this. But I did want to share this particular example because I think it shows how powerful even the tiniest of changes can be in the long run. So your goals can be bigger than mine, but I did want to share this example with you. And then what ended up happening, I did this for about a year at that frequency, sometimes a little bit more, sometimes a little bit less. And I kept walking outside. And because I was walking regularly and paying attention to my body, I started paying attention to my eating habits a little bit more and started slowly taking out some things that I had been eating too much of and putting in other things that I had been eating not enough of. And so my eating habits over time started to shift in the right direction. So you can see the domino effect that's happening here, that the fact that you are starting to put in a little bit more of that quote unquote higher energies, those behaviors that are going to change your life, your sedentary, in this example, my sedentary ways, it can transform your life. They can start having this ripple effect. But the fascinating thing, and what I really want to share here, is that it also created change in very unexpected ways. So when I would go walking, sometimes I would walk in my house, sometimes I would walk outside, sometimes I wanted something to listen to. So I started listening to spirituality videos on YouTube because the phone was in my pocket and I didn't want to watch something. I just wanted to listen to the content. And spirituality videos seemed like a great fit for that. And over time, the information that I got exposed to has really changed my spiritual path. I got interested in meditation more. I got interested in spirituality subjects that I thought I would have never have predicted, because I got interested in meditation and that whole awakening and ascension process. I also started to cut back on my caffeine. And my caffeine intake was something that I had been trying to change for years, especially in my late 20s, that I never had been able to. But the remarkable thing, and the whole point of this video, is that because I started to do something different, because, let's take this card again. Because I started to slowly work on one thing, I started with one thing, and doing that very consistently, very, very consistently, that had a very dramatic effect over time in my life, in ways that I would have predicted, and ways that I would never have predicted. Like how would 5-minute abs affect my spirituality? That that just makes no sense, right? But that's what ended up happening. And that's the beauty of something like this, is when you start walking in a certain direction that you think will be helpful to you, the momentum will pick up. And sometimes, for me, this is a much more powerful energy than when I have tried to create this and fail in my life. This is surprising, right? We think, which one is the more powerful energy? By looking at these cards, we would say, wow, this one, right? But when it comes to creating change and building momentum, doing small, doable things consistently has really been helpful. So, I know I talked about my personal example, but think about what that would look like for you. Think about what that would look like for you. And that first domino can be very important. For me, that first domino was, in this example, was the 5-minute abs, right? But a lot of times, because we can't predict, I could never have predicted where this led me. I wouldn't necessarily encourage you to spend too much time in the thinking process of, what might be that first domino that might get things going for me. I mean, you could try to do that. That's fine. But it would be more helpful, I would say, to tune into your intuition about what you think might be helpful for you to start with. Maybe it's been a little nagging voice inside of you that says, you should accept more coffee dates from your friends. You should accept, you should say yes when somebody invites you to do something. Maybe you've been working on wanting to meet a new partner, or feeling less alone. And there's a little voice that says, just say yes a little bit more often. And that little voice might be that might point you in the direction of your first domino. Or maybe the little voice says, just, watch a few more YouTube videos on painting. See what people are doing out there. Or you might have an intuition or an idea of, excuse me, of visiting museums in your city and exploring small little art galleries. So listen to that intuition that's telling you to start here. It's like your intuition is pointing an arrow and saying, start here. And that's usually a good place to start. And remember, consistency is the key. So if you do want to create change, the problem that I've often had is giving up too early. And that's why I like the example that I just shared with you, because for me, change has to be very doable. If I'm going to be consistent with something, it has to be very doable in my life. It can't be something that's going to overwhelm me, that's going to feel like too much, because when the week is busy, or I'm feeling sick, or my family needs more of my time, if something feels too much, that's the first thing to go. So think of what would feel doable in your life and see what happens over time and how you create change in your life. So if you have any stories about how you've created change in your life, I would love to hear about them in the comments below. If you had any thoughts about this video or the ideas that I shared with you, I would love to hear them. If you like this video, please remember to hit like and subscribe. And thank you so much for watching. I'll see you next time. Bye-bye.